Hello everyone. You may have met us at a farmer's market, whether it be Verona or Harrison or Pendleton, and we thought it was an appropriate time to do an intro. So we talked a lot with you guys yesterday and at previous markets about our farm and how we raise our animals and our methodologies and how we got here. And I thought it was a pertinent time to show those methodologies and talk about our farm and how we got here and where we're going. So the idea of a farm was kind of instilled in us from the youth. My grandmother grew up in Appalachia with many brothers and sisters, farming and living off the land in Irving, Kentucky. And spending time on the weekends with her, I think those ideologies were instilled a lot in me as a child, as well as I grew up in Greenville, Ohio, which is a very rural, agricultural-based town, very small. And so I kind of experienced the country life growing up. We didn't really have a farm per se. We had horses and chickens and stuff, but we never really raised animals for the purpose of meat or anything like that. So we moved to northern Kentucky shortly after, a couple years after I was born, and I lived in Fort Thomas for a while. And we had actually a little bit of acreage, surprisingly, for Fort Thomas, where we were able to have chickens, and that's kind of where Kylie came into the picture. We actually met at a pet store. Funny enough, how animals have been kind of the center of our life together. And so we met at a pet store. And at that time, we actually started breeding rabbits. So we had this tree house at my mom's house, which was actually in very bad disrepair because it originally was just built to play in, but I had this crazy idea of, well, what if we made this into a rabbit barn? And so we took this tree house and did a lot of remodeling on it. We ripped the roof off, we changed the walls and the doors, and we actually started breeding rabbits. So my brothers and Kylie and I, we had these Netherland dwarf rabbits that we were breeding inside of that. And I think that kind of, was the first piece in moving towards, breeding animals and raising livestock on a farm, and that really intrigued me. So after that, we moved to Newport, Kentucky, the opposite of a farm and agricultural. Kylie and I moved in together, and we didn't live there for very long before we decided that we hated living in the city. It just was not for us. We really like living out on the land and living with the animals and the livestock. And as we were in the Newport house, we actually got Marshall, who you've probably met, our Australian Shepherd. She was our first one, who really convinced us that we really loved the breed and that we wanted to further it and breed them. And so she started her program, and she can talk about that and what it is now a little bit.
So we got Marshall in 2020. So when we lived in the Newport house, and she was a really great dog. She obviously still is a really great dog, and I worked at a vet clinic for about 6 or 7 years while having Marshall, and having that experience really taught me that a lot of people don't really know what a well-bred dog is. So that really encouraged me to kind of do a little bit more research into why that is, and how I can help not only our local community with education on what that is working at the vet clinic, but also maybe be a pillar of someone who actually promotes and does well-bred dogs. So Marshall obviously is not a breeding dog. She was spayed when she was very young. Soon after that, we got Aubrey. So Aubrey was a dog who we also got living in Newport. And with 2 dogs and decent but smallish house living in Newport with no yard, that was really one of the big pushes for us to kind of want to move somewhere with land. And also we really had loved the idea of raising our own food. So we dabbled in a little bit. We canned a few things living in Newport, and we made our own vanilla extract and things like that, and that kind of just really solidified to us that that's the way we wanted to live. So when we moved to New Richmond, Ohio, actually was where we moved first, we got a few more dogs who ended up maybe not being great breeding candidates, so we spayed Astra, who is who I'm speaking of. And then soon after we spayed Astra, we got Lyra. So Lyra is our first breeding female that we've raised from a puppy. She has had her first litter already, and her puppies are doing really, really well. And then we got Stella. We got Stella in the New Richmond house as well. And then we figured out that we lived there for almost 3 years. We had about 85 chickens at that point. We had 2 pigs, some rabbits and things like that, but we really wanted to scale up. And at the time, we only had about 7 acres, and about 5 or maybe 4 of those acres it was a huge pond, which the dogs enjoyed, but it took up a lot of our land. So we decided that we wanted more land. So we put a little feeler out for some people, and we ended up deciding that it was just better and easier for everyone if we actually moved in with Sam's grandma for a while. So we lived in Sam's grandma's house it was over the winter. So it was over the winter and into the summer of that year, and that was in
That was last year.
That was last year. So we had how many dogs? 6. We had 6 dogs and 4 or 5 pigs at that point. All of our sheep and lambs moved with us. All of our rabbits moved with us. So it was quite the circus there for a while, but it was really fun having lived in his grandma's house. We actually landed on this property kind of by happenstance, and it was something that we kind of didn't, I don't want to say didn't enjoy or didn't want to look at from the ad on the internet, but we were like, you know, let's just go look at it and see what happens. And we actually ended up loving the land, and the house is beautiful. If you've ever been back here, we always get compliments on how stylistic the house is, but we really love it out here, and that's how the Australian Shepherd started basically. But now we have 7 breeding, or not 7 breeding dogs, but we have 7 dogs, and 2 of them are still up and coming, but they're all pets, and we love them very dearly, and they're definitely the center of what we do here.
So if you want to know more about dogs, we can post something on our website. The purpose kind of the video is to just introduce what we have and what we're doing, and then we'll show you guys around the animals and the way we raise them. One thing I like to caveat give people is a working farm is different than of agritourism or visiting farm. So if you're familiar with like Magnolia Farms with the white beautiful picket fences or whatever, that's not going to be any working farm. Everything we do is for form and function, and so we just make it work. And sometimes that means, especially when you're raising animals in pasture, that you kind of hobble things together. So you want to build them a house, we might build we want it to be really light and really durable, and so it might be a cattle panel and some 4x4s screwed together with a tarp on it, and the animals love it that way, and we love it that way, and that's how we do it. So,
especially in the summertime and early spring, there's about 18 projects going on at one time, at any given time. And because of weather or need or, you know, what have you, some of those projects get put on the back burner. So we have different sections around the front yard where there's like, this is the chicken coop we're building, and this is the beehives we need to still put together and paint, and this over here is the garden paneling we need to still put up. But all of it gets done at the end of the day, it's just in due time. But because of that, I always give people a caveat. So it's a mess, but we love our mess and we like it that way. So that's just little piece of caveat there, I guess.
So for the first animal we'll show you guys and talk about is our bees. I can see the beehives right there. I'm gonna bring a little closer and we can show you guys. All right, so our beehives are down here. We have 4 here, but we have more in the back of the property. Our beehives, these are new hives. So when we moved here from New Richmond, we ended up getting rid of our hives because moving bees, you know, moving pigs is one thing, moving bees is a completely another thing. So we got rid of them and we restarted. When we bring you guys honey at the market or whatever, this is, you know, some of the hives that it will come from. So our bees are pretty much self-sufficient. With a lot of our animals, we believe that they somewhat know the best way to raise themselves. So we kind of go in and work with them, and we live stream that actually when we do sometimes. And we go in, we look at their hives and we make sure everything's good from a general standpoint, but we're not really like a heavy user of any kind of chemicals or acids or anything like that. Like you see a lot of people do. So these guys, you know, fly around and roam our 50 acres, our neighbors 100 acres, our other neighbors 200 acres, and get pollen and stuff from the flowers. And we're a big believer, if you notice that our grass is actually very tall and there are flowers everywhere, that it's very beneficial to leave your grass like that, not only for the bees, but the other pollinators too. And so in the spring and summer, we often only really mow a small patch around our house that we routinely use maybe for like playing toys with the dogs or whatever. And then we leave the rest of it tall because I think that's the best for nature. When the pollinators come through and they pollinate the flowers yield food for other animals, whether it's the meat chickens, the sheep, or whatever. And so everything kind of works in symbiosis, you know, starting from the bees. One of the most important things we actually have on the farm. If you've seen us in the market, you know that we raise pastured pork. And so what pastured pork means to us, and we've talked about this a lot in other videos, is zero confinement. So on our farm, we have no commercial barn setups. We don't have any way to confine them. They don't live on concrete. They live out in the pasture in the dirt. So these are our 3 sows right now and our 1 boar. So 3 females and 1 male pig. And they're all living together right now for the purpose of creating more piglets. We've had really good demand thanks to awesome customers like you. And so it's been a priority for us to produce some more piglets so we have some more pork consistently throughout the market. So these guys are all Idaho pasture pigs. Idaho pasture pigs were a mixture of past heritage breed pigs to improve some of the negative qualities of them. Well, Peach actually is not a Peach is right here. She's actually a Kuna pig, but Idaho pasture pigs were a mixture of previous breeds to take all of the good and bad things and breed a better pig out of them. So these guys are excellent at birthing in the pasture. They're gonna get angry. That's just what pigs do. They're excellent at birthing in the pasture, so it's a priority for us to not only raise them on the pasture, but for them to actually birth them. And when the piglets are born on the dirt, then one of the benefits of raising them in the pasture is all the minerals that are in the dirt, the pigs immediately can start getting. So in a traditional confinement and commercial setup, where they're living inside of a warehouse with no sun and no dirt, the piglets have to be constantly supplemented with artificial chemicals, hormones, and whatever to create healthy piglets. In the pasture, they have everything they need out here. And so every pig gets an enormous amount of space and property. This is actually our breeding pen. So this is one of our smaller setups. It's probably like maybe 200 by 200. We want to keep it a little smaller for the purpose of successfully creating more piglets. So throughout all of our property, as you come in, there's pig pastures in our grass parts of our fields and our woods. So we run the pigs through the woods. They like to eat acorns, walnuts, mushrooms, roots, whatever they can find. And pigs are just one piece of the working aspect of like regenerative farming. So pigs come through with their snout and they naturally till the soil and aerate it. And if you run them over an area that has been used a lot, they actually till that manure into the soil and it helps regrow the land. So one really important aspect of farming to us is not only taking from the land, but also giving back to it. There's a lot of abundance around us, and if we use the abundance in a smart way, then it's for the benefit of all the farm. And just to speak about our protocol at the pigs, so everyone is rotated. This is a concept shared across all of our animals, whether it's chickens, sheep, pigs, whatever. We have many pastures. We rotate them through them all. So for pigs, that looks like maybe every a month or two. It depends on how worn down and how much rain we've gotten. And so we work them through the pasture for the purpose of reducing our reliance on synthetic chemicals, reduce our reliance on dewormers. So by rotating an animal, you reduce the parasite load, which means you have to use fewer dewormers, which is better for the end product is for you. I'm in our orchard now. This orchard's kind of in its infant state. So last year we planted about 60 fruit trees. We have a good mixture of all kinds of peaches, apples, plums, and cherries. And the purpose of that was to bring fresh produce to the market for people, to bring fresh produce to our house for us to eat, and to bring fresh produce to the animals, and etc. So you'll notice that in the orchard, we have these beautiful wildflowers growing. Again, same principle as I talked about before. I think it's very beneficial for the pollinators. We mow our grass too much in general as a society. We use too many chemicals on our grass as a society. It really hurts the population of bees. And nothing is more satisfying than being out here and watching all the butterflies, the bees, the dragonflies, and everything flying around. And they are probably about 2 or 3 years from producing, but that is all right. We are taking care of it, and within the next 2 or 3 years, you should see us have some fruit. Okay, so now we're out here in the sheep pasture. So we raise all of our animals with the same principle. Sheep are herd animals, and the nature movement is one key of all herd animals. If you think about caribou or elk or moose or whatever it is, they are constantly migrating and moving through area. And what that does naturally is actually reduces their parasite load by themselves. And so to replicate that with the abundance of nature that we have, we do the same thing with the sheep. So we have Katahdin sheep, some are Katahdin Dorper crosses, and they live inside of this kind of temporary netting that we move around. It's electric. And so every 2 or 3 weeks, we'll actually rotate their pasture throughout our land with the purpose of giving the sheep new forage, reducing the parasite load, and rebuilding the land. And so the same principles with the pigs applies to that with the sheep. That results in fewer deworming. These guys almost never have to be dewormed. It results in healthier sheep because they get so much access to forage, and it creates a superior product for you guys. And so all throughout the woods and our pasture, we will move them. Right now, this pasture is a little bit worn down because it was so hot this last week. We kept them on this pasture longer. We have this gigantic oak tree, which you can't see right here, but it provides them so much cool shade. So when you raise animals in the pasture and you don't use a barn, you have more complex considerations for kind of the habitat they live in. If it's gonna be really hot, you need to make sure they have a really cool place to live. And so you use these trees naturally to kind of give them breaks from the sun. In the winter, when it's really cold, you have to also make sure they have places to bed down that are going to be warm. Even though they have hair or wool, they still need windbreaks and they still need the ability to get out of the snow, because a cold and a wet sheep or lamb is a very bad story. So we have about 15 of them right now. We only had, as of this last year, I think 5 sheep. We actually, over the winter, got several bottle lambs, and so now we have about 15. So going into the next growing season, we anticipated the demand for lamb to go up, and therefore next year we should have hopefully as much lamb as we can possibly bring to you guys, because everyone seems to love it. But these are the sheep. We fed them for this video because otherwise all you would hear is, and like sheep noises, and they'd be knocking the tripod over and whatever. So they're very friendly. And the one cool thing about Katahdin sheep are their hair sheep. So a wool sheep, traditionally, you would associate having to shear. Hair sheep naturally will lose their hair based on the season. So in the fall, they'll actually grow their hair. and it'll get thick over the winter. As soon as the warm days come and the daylight starts to get a little longer in the spring, they'll drop their hair. You don't have to shear them. And a lot of people say that's associated with hair sheep actually having a less gamey taste than wool sheep, because the hormone called linolin that actually grows their wool, the hair sheep don't have much of, therefore they don't taste as gamey. So those are our lambs and our sheep, and they're enjoying some food down there. And in general, we try to give them, I would say 90 to 95% grass-fed diet. So we give them really fresh hay, really fresh water, minerals, and sometimes some alfalfa pellets and stuff like that, and they eat forage. And then we give them grain on days we're moving them, on days where we need a little bit of quiet like this for a video or something, whatever. So we get a really good mixture of forage and diet we feed them. And one thing I forgot to mention about our sheep is the lambs are never vaccinated. There's no hormones or anything like that. The only vaccines we ever use for the sheep are for the adults when they get CDT, the tetanus vaccines, because it's kind of rampant sometimes in pastures and it's a really bad way for them to go. So the mothers are given it regularly. The lambs are not ever given it because they don't really quite need it. These are our pasture-based chickens. This is how we raise them. So these guys are Cornish rock cross chickens. They're actually going to the butcher on Thursday. They're about 6 or 7 weeks old. This is how we pasture them. So this device here we call the tractor. We build these kind of by our own design. So it gives them a lot of shade. It gives them protection from predators. We feed and water them inside of it, and they have access to the grass freely. And so what the tractor allows us to do is actually drag it. So every, 1 to 3 times a day, depends on how big they are and stuff. We drag them, it gives them fresh grass, it spreads their manure, which is another regenerative aspect of the farm, and it just gives them a happy, healthy life. So instead of living in these gigantic hoop house, dark barns where each chicken has half a square foot and there's dead chickens everywhere, they get this nice fresh grass to frolic on in the sun, and they get to enjoy their best chicken life. You can see they're coming up to the thing right here. They're pretty beefy birds. And so if you think about, in the conclusion of all of our animals, how they all kind of work, as a cycle, we have the pigs tilling the land. They obviously provide manure. We have the chickens dropping manure on the land. We have the sheep grazing the land and obviously creating more manure. And when you use those guys, all three of them, you give back to nature as much as you take from it, which builds the land. So the piece about regenerative farming that is the most important is rebuilding the land. You don't want to farm on a piece of land for 50 years and then you can never grow anything in it again because you've sucked all the nutrients out of it. You want to farm in a sustainable way, and that's what it allows us to do. In the coming future, in terms of what we're looking forward to, obviously more pigs, more sheep, and more chickens, but we're also considering highly right now pasture. We have actually some egg-laying chickens, like 50 of our own, but we're considering bringing some pastured eggs to the market too, not just from our own chickens, but actually getting a new flock. And so we're actually thinking about some designs for how we can best build a movable egg layer tractor system that we can actually have inside of the sheep pasture. So the sheep and the chickens will live together. The chickens will scratch the sheep manure and help rebuild the soil while the sheep are kind of grazing. So that's kind of our next plans for the farm. All right, to conclude our little tour, I want to say thanks for watching. If you guys ever have any questions or comments or concerns, you can feel free to let us know. If you ever want to come out and see the farm and see our practices in person, you're more than welcome to. And the next year, assuming everything goes well and everything is, all our programs kind of are bountiful, we will probably offer wholes and halves of lambs and pigs and stuff like that. But yeah, we really appreciate your guys' support through markets and through social media. We couldn't do it without you. And so if you ever want us to see us add anything or you have any feedback, just let us know. But other than that, we really appreciate it and thank you.